There have been 43 presidents of the United States, with one serving a second term after a lost term. Some have been memorable, others forgettable. Each of them has been very human, however, with all the foibles and eccentricities that entails. Here are some of the strange or lesser-known facts about the U.S. presidents. Number 1. George Washington. Thinking that shaking hands was beneath the dignity of the president, Washington preferred to bow to greet guests. To avoid being forced into a handshake, he would place one hand on his sword and hold his hat in the other. Number 2. John Adams. Adams, the second president, and Jefferson, the third, both died on the same day, July 4, 1826, exactly 50 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Adams' last words, probably apocryphal, are said to be, "Jefferson survives," when in fact Jefferson had died hours earlier. Number 3. Thomas Jefferson. While a famous writer, the chief composer of the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson hated public speaking and avoided giving speeches. Jefferson started the tradition of delivering written State of the Union statements, which lasted until the 20th century. Number 4. James Madison. Madison was the slightest president. Standing at 5 feet 4 inches and weighing less than 100 pounds, you would need 3.5 Madisons to make up a Taft, the heaviest president. Number 5. James Monroe. In his re-election, Monroe ran unopposed for the presidency. He failed to receive all the votes in the Electoral College, however, when a rogue member cast his ballot for John Quincy Adams. Number 6. John Quincy Adams. Adams was fond of swimming naked in the Potomac. When an intrepid female reporter wished to get an interview with the president, she stole his clothes until he agreed to an interview. Number 7. Andrew Jackson. Jackson was a noted duelist. When a man impugned Jackson's wife, they dueled. The man shot Jackson over the heart. Jackson coolly took aim and killed the man. It was too risky to remove the bullet, and so it remained in Jackson for the rest of his life. Number 8. Martin Van Buren. Van Buren's first language was not English. He was raised speaking Dutch. Number 9. William Henry Harrison. Harrison delivered the longest inaugural address and had the shortest presidency. His long speech and bad weather led to him developing a cold, which worsened and caused his death after a month in office. Number 10. John Tyler. Tyler was the first vice president to assume office after the death of a president in office. He had the most children of any president, 15. Number 11. James Polk. Polk was elected on a promise not to run for a second term in office. Number 12. Zachary Taylor. Taylor died from contracting cholera from a bowl of cherries washed down with iced milk. Number 13. Millard Filmore. Filmore refused an honorary degree from the University of Oxford, on the basis that he was not classically educated and so could not read the diploma, written in Latin. He said, "No man should accept a degree he cannot read." Number 14. Franklin Pierce. While president, Pierce was arrested for running over an old woman with his horse. Number 15. James Buchanan. Often rated the worst president when historians are polled. His presidency included the secession of 7 states and a major depression. Some historians believe that Buchanan was the first gay U.S. president. He was certainly the only one to be unwed for the duration of his term of office. Number 16. Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln was a notably ugly man in photos, but people who met him described his face as intelligent and handsome in motion. The first president to wear a beard, he grew it at the suggestion of a young girl, Grace Goodell, who wrote to him. Number 17. Andrew Johnson. Johnson was drunk at Lincoln's second inauguration. The event was described by a senator as follows: "The inauguration went off very well, except that the vice president-elect was too drunk to perform his duties and disgraced himself and the Senate by making a drunken foolish speech. I was never so mortified in my life. Had I been able to find a hole, I would have dropped through it out of sight." Number 18. Ulysses S. Grant. Grant gained a reputation for drinking heavily while still a young man. When President Lincoln was warned about Grant's drinking habits during the Civil War, he is supposed to have responded, "If it makes fighting men like Grant, then find out what he drinks, and send my other commanders a case." Number 19. Rutherford Hayes. The only president to be elected via a special congressional committee which ruled on various ballots contested during the election. His election is still contested by historians. Number 20. James Garfield. Garfield could write Latin with his left hand whilst simultaneously writing Greek with his right. Number 21. Chester A. Arthur. This ex-president sold off all the furniture in the White House before moving in. Lots of it dated back to the construction of the White House, and any such pieces would be hugely valuable today. 22. Grover Cleveland. As well as being the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms, Cleveland was a huge fan of the telephone and would personally answer the White House phone. Number 23. Benjamin Harrison. While in office, Harrison had electricity installed in the White House. Unfortunately, he and his wife were terrified of it and would not touch switches for fear of electrocution, and often slept with the lights on. Number 24. Grover Cleveland. The first Democrat elected after the Civil War, Grover Cleveland was the only president to leave the White House and return for a second term 4 years later. Number 25. William McKinley. McKinley was the first president to appear on motion picture. Number 26. Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt was the first American to win a Nobel Prize, the first president to leave the country while in office, and the first to fly in an airplane. Number 27. William Howard Taft. Taft is best known for being the fattest president, but he also holds a sporting title. He was the first president to cast the opening pitch of a baseball season. Number 28. Woodrow Wilson. Wilson was the best-educated president, the only one to hold a Ph.D., and yet he did not learn to read until he was 11. Number 29. Warren Harding. Harding was so fond of cards that his cabinet was known as the poker cabinet because they all played together. At his poker parties, alcohol, illegal during Prohibition, would flow freely. Number 30. Calvin Coolidge. Coolidge was a man of very few words and so became known as Silent Cal. He was so taciturn that when Dorothy Parker was told he had died, she replied, "How could they tell?" Number 31. Herbert Hoover. Hoover and his wife spoke fluent Mandarin Chinese. When they did not wish to be overheard, they would speak Mandarin. Number 32. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. FDR's wife was also a Roosevelt and so did not have to change her name on marriage. At their wedding, the bride was given away by President Theodore Roosevelt. Number 33. Harry S. Truman. Like the S in Ulysses Grant's name, the S in Truman's name meant nothing. It was only ever an S as a way of mollifying both grandfathers whose names began with S. Number 34. Dwight Eisenhower. Eisenhower installed the putting green at the White House. When squirrels were ruining the grass, he had them removed from the gardens. Number 35. John F. Kennedy. When his ship was sunk in World War II, Kennedy swam 3.5 miles pulling a wounded crewman by a strap held in his teeth. Number 36. Lyndon Johnson. Johnson loved the drink Fresca so much that he had a fountain of it installed in the White House. Number 37. Richard Nixon. Nixon so enjoyed bowling that he had the White House pool replaced with a bowling lane. Number 38. Gerald Ford. Ford was the only president never elected to either the presidency or the vice presidency. He was appointed by Richard Nixon as his vice president and assumed the presidency after Nixon's resignation. Number 39. Jimmy Carter. As a young man, Carter shot his sister with a BB gun in retaliation for her throwing a wrench at him. Number 40. Ronald Reagan. The blueberry-flavored Jelly Belly bean was created for Reagan's inauguration, since he was a great fan of the sweets. A portrait of the president made of jelly beans hangs in his library. Number 41. George Bush. While visiting Japan, Bush vomited at a banquet hosted by the Japanese Prime Minister. The event coined a new Japanese phrase, Bushasuru, literally, to do the Bush thing. Number 42. Bill Clinton. While in high school, Clinton was a member of a jazz quartet who played in dark glasses. They called themselves the Three Blind Mice. Number 43. George W. Bush. Bush is the president with both the highest and lowest recorded approval ratings. They peaked after 9/11 and slumped after Hurricane Katrina. Number 44. Barack Obama. Obama is a well-known nerd who collects comic books. When Nichelle Nichols, Uhura from Star Trek, visited the White House, Obama made the Vulcan salute in greeting. Number 45. Donald Trump. Trump doesn't drink alcohol. His brother was an alcoholic and died because of his addiction in 1982.